Hi, everybody. It's Crystal here from Crystal Clear ESL. Thank you for joining us today. We are here with Anton Taruc, online book club facilitator. Now, if you're wondering what that means, then stay tuned because Anton's going to be discussing some alternatives to the traditional one-to-one teaching method for attracting a wider range of English language learners. Welcome, Anton.
Hi, thank you for having me, Crystal.
Well, thank you for coming today. I'm excited to learn more about this. I think typically teachers come into online ESL teaching with this format of one-to-one. Many of these teachers have rolled off of contracted platforms where that is the norm per se. So
Yes.
why don't you start us off, Anton, by telling us a little bit about how you got started?
Sure. There are probably two things in my background that have really fed into what I'm currently doing.
Okay.
So the first is I've taught for about 15 years, and most of that has been overseas. So I taught in Thailand, in China. I taught in the US for a little bit as well, but most of my career has been international.
Right.
And that's important because it really helped me build a pretty strong network overseas, which is fed into what I'm currently doing. And the second part is I am married to a diplomat. And when my wife and I got married 4 years ago, I was aware that there would be a lot of moving in my future and that many of those moves would not necessarily coincide with a school calendar year.
Right.
So aware of that, I started thinking about a backup plan in case I had to move or I couldn't be in the classroom. What are some things that I could do where I could continue doing what I love, which is teaching, but have that flexibility? And that's what led into me starting my online business with the book clubs.
Right. Wonderful. I love how resourceful you've been in just sort of tweaking and amending your passion to wherever you've ended up. I think that's great. But I'm also interested in what you said about how your travel has led to creating a network and how you have transferred those personal relationships, like live and in person, into a network that you can follow up with. Do you store WeChat or?
Yeah, so being a classroom teacher, right? So a big part of that is communication with the parents, having parent-teacher conferences. And I think over time, there was a trust that was built there.
Right.
Like parents trusted the work that I was doing with the students. Students enjoyed working with me, and I absolutely enjoyed working with the students. And so when that transition came and my wife and I had to move back to DC, several parents actually who knew that I was going to be moving back, but I didn't necessarily have a school yet, sort of floated the idea about us potentially working together.
Right.
And I also sort of had a plan about teaching online. I didn't really know what model it was going to take yet. But then when I saw that there was a number of interested parents, that made me aware that there was a market. Right. And so that gave me the time. I told them, like, give me a few weeks to really come up with what my vision would be.
Okay.
Because I had an idea of what I enjoy in the classroom.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to replicate that. And that's how I ended up doing group classes.
Okay. So did you go full steam ahead into that model, or do you have more experience with a different range of things? And if so, which?
Yeah, it was actually full steam ahead.
Was it?
With that model. So I think a big part of my background too, for undergrad, I was in a great books program. So talking about books and ideas was always a part of my own training.
Okay.
And when I did my master's in education, we actually had a class on book clubs as part of our reading unit.
Right.
And all the schools that I've worked at have also incorporated book clubs into the curriculum.
At your suggestion?
No.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of the schools I've worked with have done a lot of teachers' college reading and writing workshop, and book club is a part of that.
Okay.
And when COVID happened and I was still in the classroom, we had to transition online, and it also coincided with our book club units. So then I was also running book clubs for my school online, and I saw that, it was possible.
They still work, yeah.
So when I started creating my own vision for independent teaching, I knew that talking about books, having that conversation piece, having students learning from each other and not just from me, was something that I wanted to bring into my niche, so to speak.
Right. Why do you think it's valuable for the students to be learning from each other?
Well, one, I think, when I've shared this book club model with some other teachers, and a big question that I get from them is, wait, so kids are actually willing to read, right? Because in a book club, by the time we meet, the expectation is that the students have already done the reading.
They've done it, yes.
And I would like to think that part of that is me motivating the kids to read and sharing my love for reading. But I know that a bigger part of it is because they get to discuss books with their friends. And I've found that that's been the biggest motivation piece for the students, because they're really excited to hear ideas from one another and to share their ideas.
Right. So they have to be ready. They have to have done the homework so that they can be engaged and
exactly
say, the things they want to say.
Exactly. Wow. And the model works because, so I meet with most of my clubs once a week. I have a club that meets twice a week. But what's really happening is that work is ongoing throughout the week, because the students are reading the chapters, they're writing down their thoughts, they're thinking, and us meeting is just a part of the process.
Which is so clever, because I've always said any parent or student, for that matter, that thinks that 25 minutes a week of English lessons is going to produce a native equivalent speaker is just totally wrong. They need to be dipping in little and often, don't they? So by nature of these book clubs, that's exactly what is happening.
100%. And we have group emails, right? Because I'll send out the chapters, I'll send out some questions for them to reflect on. But what I've found is that the students actually will jump into the emails and say, oh my God, I can't believe in chapter 7 that this happened, or, spoiler alert. Yeah. And then of course I enjoy that. So then I'll start emailing back, and
it becomes a conversation.
Yeah. It does. And it builds that excitement level for when we actually do meet.
Oh, that's so fun. So tell us about your ideal student or your star student then. What type of people tend to join?
So now one thing I do have to share here is that they're all language learners, but they're all quite advanced.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
And so my book club really focuses more on young adult dystopian literature, because I work mostly with middle school students. So at 5th grade up until 8th grade. And I've found that dystopian literature is just such an awesome genre for this age group.
Yes.
Because there's so much about the sense of justice, what's right, what's wrong, who holds the power in a story. And there's also a lot of crushes happening in the stories, right? Relationships. And this age group really loves that as well. Wow. So the ideal student is someone who's willing to be challenged, right? Willing to dive deep into a text.
Yeah.
Someone who knows how to listen. I find that a lot of my work is teaching the students too how to listen for listening's sake, and not listen to respond, but how to truly listen and then to build on the ideas of their friends. So that's also another angle that the book clubs take that have had a lot of value. Just the students are really learning how to hold different thoughts in their mind, how to deal with some dissonance.
Okay.
Right? Because their understanding of the text might not necessarily be how their friend understands the text.
Right.
And then we work it out.
Like debating skills as well.
100%.
Yeah.
For sure. So it's all those things. And the main driver of the class is the book. Mm-hmm. Right? So my job as the facilitator is I make sure that I am up to date with good literature.
Okay. Not me
now. and then I facilitate the conversation. I'll usually start off with a small mini lesson as well during our sessions. Okay. And just looking at my notes, like this past week in one of my classes, we talked about theme. Another, we talked about character development. We talk about the hero's journey, character archetypes, literary tropes.
Right.
These are things that I'll do about 5-6 minutes just to sort of warm up the class. And then we jump in and have our discussion.
Yeah, I love that because it not only provides a basis for the lesson and a bit of focus, but you're actually introducing keywords and new vocabulary and things that they'll take with them, you know, through university and through life if it's their interest.
Definitely. And what I've found too, the students will come and they'll say, hey, you know, I had a test in my humanities class today, and in my essay, I shared some of the things that we had been discussing in our book clubs. And my teacher commented on something that I said or something that I wrote. And so they're seeing how the conversations we have in our book clubs lend themselves to the work that they're doing in their classrooms.
Right.
And from time to time, I'll get emails from parents as well saying, hey, you know, after the book club, we had dinner and my child was talking about some of the things that you had discussed in book club. And so it's just this, it's a culture, right, that's being built.
Right. And an academic one. Well done. So what would you say is the minimum proficiency level that you accept for an incoming student?
They're all, I'd say they're probably definitely reading at grade level, right? Because the texts that I'll pick are suitable for 5th grade and up.
Okay.
But what most of them are actually reading about a grade level above.
Wow. These are the clever kids in a different language than their native.
Yes, they're clever, but also and another beautiful thing about group classes and book clubs is that it provides different entry points.
Okay.
Right? Because when you're discussing a big idea, the kids are able to access it from different points of view. And I definitely have clubs where some kids might be a little bit more advanced than others. And yet, because there's so many different things that we can discuss, everyone is able to have their voices be heard in the class.
Exactly. How many kids do you usually include in a club?
I found the sweet spot is 3.
Oh, they're pretty.
So I have a club with 2, most are 3. Then I have a club with 4. Yeah. I did have a club with 5, but now it's 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Do the children usually know each other in advance, or they come in just totally independently?
Most of them would know each other because, and I'll share how it's kind of grown. So I started off with a core group of parents, right, with their kids who all knew each other. But through word of mouth, it's actually grown quite a bit. And there are some students who might know one person in the club, but they come in and it's actually students recruiting other students because these kids are involved with sports, they're involved with debate clubs after school. And from time to time, I'll get an email from a parent saying, hi, I heard about your club from my daughter who is in debate club with so-and-so. And so students talk and they enjoy it and they invite their friends in.
Right. That's so great. So it's more organic marketing. If you ever have to recruit students more actively, how would you go about that?
If I had to, I think I've done this enough now, the book clubs, that I really, really believe in the value that it adds to the learner. And so I would be able to share with a parent and say, here's how your child could grow through this club. Here's what I've seen. Here's what parents have told me. Here's what students have told me.
Right. Yeah. So you could reach out to them over, I don't know, email or WeChat or
over email.
Yeah.
WeChat. But fortunately, I haven't had to actively recruit, right? But another thing I do, Crystal, is when a parent reaches out to me and says, oh, my child's interested, I do make sure that I meet one-on-one with the child first.
Oh, okay. Like a get-to-know session.
Yes. And that's important to me because I want to really understand what the motivation is. I want them to know what my expectations are. I want them to get a sense of my teaching style. And I want to know that it's from the student, right? Because sometimes parents can say, oh, I want my kid to do this, but so many of the kids already have so many other classes going on.
Well, they're just
And
not into it.
yes, and when I was in the classroom, when I was teaching, I was always, I wouldn't say sad, but I always felt for my students who had several classes after school,
Yeah.
right? And now that I am one of those people offering classes after school, I want to make sure that it's something that the kids really do enjoy
Exactly.
and that they see the value in it. And that's important to me.
Yeah, no, I fully agree, definitely. Wow, incredible. What about any sort of peripheral additions? Do you do feedback? Do you send out a newsletter, anything like that?
After the book clubs, I will probably send a quick message to the parents saying, hey, I really enjoyed meeting with your child today. Here were some of the ideas that we had discussed, right? I don't do that after every club,
Right.
but I'll make sure to touch base with them from time to time. And then, of course, also as we end our session, I will tell the kids what I noticed in the book clubs, what are things that I appreciated that they brought in to the club, some thoughts and ideas that they could think about as they prepare for the next club. It's very organic, it's in the moment.
Does it take a lot of preparation for every lesson?
So the beauty with book clubs is one, and a big reason why I chose to do book clubs is my preparation is me reading the book.
Yeah.
And that's something that I would naturally do anyway.
Right.
And so, and that was part of my process when I was thinking about the type of class that I wanted to offer. I wanted to offer something that I myself would really enjoy.
Right.
And so my prep is I make sure that I read the chapters as well, right? It's not for, if I make the students do the work, I need to be doing the work too. I'm also writing down my thoughts, my ideas. Now, of course, because I've run so many different book clubs, there are times when we read the same book. So I do this book with this club and I'll do the same book with another club. And yet each club brings in a different perspective. So as I'm reading, for example, we read a lot of Marie Lu books, and if I'm reading Legend, and I know that this club tends to focus on this type of thinking, I will reread Legend again with a certain lens.
From that, yeah, from that perspective. Very clever. And you already mentioned that you send out some discussion questions in advance. So are those the ones that you then ask in the
No,
session?
not necessarily. It's just, hey, as you're reading, based on the conversation that we had. For instance, this week, some of the big questions I had in different clubs, one student really wanted to focus on whether a hero needs a villain and whether a villain needs a hero. What happens to a hero if there's no villain, right? So do they actually, is it a relationship that is so essential in a story? And that was a question that the student came up with. So then what I'll say is, as you're reading the next 7, 8 chapters, reflect on this question and let's discuss that.
Love it.
And I'll make a note, and that's probably how I might approach that particular meeting, but then it's also open to whatever other questions pop up.
Right.
For another book club, a student was really interested in the idea of fear and wanted to know, what does fear reveal to us about a character? And as we were talking about it, we started realizing that it tells us what these characters are afraid of or how they respond. And so now that particular club is looking at how the character responds to other elements of fear or what drives the fear. Right. And these are ideas and questions generated by the students.
Yes. Oh, wow. You let the students take the reins. What would you say to a teacher who wants to get started with book clubs in terms of preparing them for any pitfalls they might encounter?
So a challenge would probably be setting up the initial group, right? Because you do want students who are reading at around the same level. So I think that would be the biggest.
That you do that?
Say that again.
Do you have a way that you do that? Do you send them for a proficiency test or?
Well, I kind of get a sense when I meet with them one-on-one, right? But because of the nature of the book clubs now and the way other students get invited, right? It's a friend inviting their friend,
right,
or a parent telling me about the child of a parent friend of theirs. They usually are probably going to the same school,
right.
or they're in the same friend group, and the levels might sort of be are in the same ballpark,
Yeah,
right? But then I'll still definitely, and it's probably happened once or twice where it was a friend of a student, but you could see that the levels were quite different. So I will talk to the parent and say, hey, I have another club where I think your child would really thrive. And that's worked out well.
yeah, yeah.
But so
Any
to
other pitfalls?
yeah, so making sure you have the right levels. And then I think also just being aware of the books out there, right? Because you also have to know what are the types of books that students today enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent a lot of time when I was planning, coming up with my vision for this class. I spent a lot of time in bookstores and libraries, just reading and being aware of how middle school age kids think, reading a book and previewing it and saying, okay, this would be a good fit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You have to read a lot to find the right one or two.
and hopefully you've already read a lot, like reading has already been a part of your life. I think this would be a hard thing to start for someone who doesn't take joy in reading.
Right.
Another challenging thing would be the logistical part, right? So it it's worked out well that the students that I work with do have access to books, whether that's through their school library or they have Kindles.
In
So they're able
English. That was it.
in
Yes.
English.
I
Yeah. So
wanted to ask
that's
exactly this about how the students are able to procure the books, but also do you have to be a little bit sensitive about the cultural variations and cultural interests?
definitely. And a lot of dystopian novels. Well, this one author who we're reading about, actually, her parents came from a particular country where many of my students are from.
Okay.
And many of the themes and ideas that she talks about are based on real life experiences that perhaps her parents went through. And she sort of turned that into more of like a dystopian world. So as we're talking, you're definitely aware of some of the historical context that might drive some of these books.
Right.
And that's why previewing the book is so important too, right? So I'm aware in case this comes up, how do we shift it to so that it's not as sensitive, right? Because, and again, these are thoughtful middle school students, so they do want to push and probe, and they do want to make those connections.
Yeah.
So that's one. The procuring of books, a lot of my students do have Kindles, and that's definitely something that I discuss with the parents and with the students prior. I want to make sure that they will have access to the books, that they are willing to purchase the books.
Yeah.
And that hasn't really been an issue so far, fortunately.
Great.
Um,
Very cool. Would you say that the idea of running book clubs is transferable to younger students or lower proficiency students in a variation?
I think so. I've reflected on this question because I've actually had other friends or teachers ask that too. I think I'm very fortunate that the group that I work with, or the market that I work with, there's a lot of advanced readers.
Yeah.
But one thing a teacher could do is, instead of longer books, it could be more of like an article club, right? News articles or short stories, whatever fits the need, the levels of the students. But what is transferable is the teaching of kids, helping them learn how to listen to one another, helping them learn how to build on the ideas of their classmates, right? And that has a lot of value. And you know, and language stems, even though my learners are quite advanced, we also do spend some time on language stems. What does it sound like when you are thoughtfully challenging the idea of a friend? What does
Right.
it sound like when you want to build on the idea of a friend, or you want to push their thinking further?
Okay.
And those are things that are very transferable.
Right. Of course. Cool. So how do you integrate or tackle a language learning objective within your book club? Do you correct pronunciation? You've already said you introduced some new keywords. Any other ways?
A lot of it depends on each individual learner, right? And you also, I as a teacher always have to find the balance, because the goal is getting them excited to share their ideas. And if I was putting those breaks every single time they mispronounced the word or their grammar was slightly off, that could also destroy the momentum of the book club.
Right.
But I will take notes, and if it's a pattern that's happening quite a bit, then I will speak with the student.
Yeah.
Or I'll make it a teaching point for next book club. So for instance, Crystal, I have some students who use a lot of filler words, a lot of like,
Okay.
um, um, um. And I get that. That happens with
Even
us
for native
as
speakers,
well.
right?
But when I started to notice that it was blocking the student from really being more articulate and really sharing his thoughts, I created a mini lesson for our next book club on how to take some pause time, how when a question is asked, how you don't have to feel like you have to jump into it right away.
Right.
How can you take that split second, come up with your first sentence or two, gather your thoughts, and then articulate your ideas more efficiently. And that was part of our focus for that particular book club. So we were still discussing the book, we were still sharing our ideas, but we were also more mindful of how we could communicate more effectively.
The delivery. Wonderful.
Exactly.
I love that. So what next, Anton? Are you just going to keep this up? Do you have any plans to diversify? What's next for you?
So my true love, Crystal, is being in the classroom, right? That's first and foremost. And so I'm currently in Mexico City. As I had mentioned earlier, I am married to a diplomat, so we move quite a bit. And we moved to Mexico about a month ago, which of course is towards the end of the school year. But I did get a job offer from an international school here for beginning in August.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
So I'm very excited about that, but I will definitely continue the book clubs up until then. And schedule wise, it could actually work that I could continue the book clubs, because some of my students in my book clubs have already asked me, wait, so you're going to start working at a school again. Does that mean we don't get to do book clubs? And I said, that's a conversation that we'll have closer to the date. But for now, it's definitely running. With summer coming up, summer is actually quite a busy time with the book clubs, because many of the parents definitely want their students reading through the summer.
And some of their week to week engagements have slowed down a little.
Exactly. And so last summer was that was probably the busiest I had been. I had multiple clubs running, but I loved it. My wife actually comments after my book clubs, like I'll go have breakfast, and she's like, man, you are just super happy right now. And it's fun. And I think that's something that I would tell any teacher, right? Because I think in one of your videos, Crystal, that I saw, you spoke about the importance of having a niche when you're teaching online. And there's a lot of benefits that come with teaching online, right? The flexibility, the schedule, but it can also be hard. You don't have colleagues. It can be a bit lonely at times.
Definitely.
And so I think if you could find an avenue for teaching online, but doing something that you yourself enjoy. Right. And not just for its perks, right? For the flexibility and all of that, but also just because it challenges you, it motivates you, it gets you excited as a teacher, then that's the dream.
Absolutely. It's funny you bring that up about my past notes about having a niche, because I always do that in relation to marketing. But you are 100% on target when you bring up that a niche isn't only for marketing and business purposes. It's also so that you can be passionate about what you're doing, and therefore, keep doing it long term and pass that passion on to your students.
Definitely. And when you enjoy it, then you tend to do it well, right? And so I think one of the challenges with one-to-one teaching, sometimes like I imagine it can get tiring and it can be challenging.
Right.
Though I guess any type of teaching can be challenging. But when you truly enjoy what you're doing, then there is that motivation and you come into class excited, and the students do sense that.
Right, exactly.
And yeah, and so in fact, I have a student, and I think this is a testament to her and her love for reading and the other students in her club, but she actually joins us from a car when we're having a book, because she does ballet.
Okay.
And
en route somewhere.
En route, yeah. So from ballet on her way to home. And I've told her, it's like, hey, we can start the club a bit later, but she was aware that her other classmates, that was a better time for them. She's like, no, it's fine. So she's in her car, she has her phone, she has her book,
yeah,
and she's there participating. I've had students go on holiday with their parents and they will join in from the hotel.
Wow. So therefore, you truly have passed on that passion of yours, because the students are doing it for fun. They're not doing it for learning or language study or future academic entry.
Yeah, and reading can be such a social endeavor. And I think one, yes, there's that passion for reading, and I'd like to think that I've picked really good books. I'd like to think that I am in fun and engaging in the classroom. But I think a bigger part of it is they see their friends online and they get to chat with their friends. And I have some students who are in different countries. They were classmates, but then one moves.
Oh.
So I have a student in Australia, for instance, and he will come in and he's chatting with some of his former classmates.
Right. And it's a great way for them to keep in touch.
Keep in touch, but again, within the confines of the book. And the book just opens up all these avenues for conversation.
Well, speaking of avenues of conversation, don't forget today you're watching an interview with Anton by Crystal Clear ESL. So if you've enjoyed the talk today, please like and subscribe to our channel. Anton, I just want to thank you so much for sharing this expertise with us, your idea, and how very motivated and motivating it's been to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Crystal.